I'm Rachael Maves, and you're listening to the Getting Naked with Leaders in Education podcast, where we strip away the layers and get to the raw, unfiltered stories behind the leaders shaping the future of education. My guest today is Eugene Park, founder of Parsec Education. Founded in 2018, Parsec Education's mission is to improve and transform K-12 education and student outcomes through modernizing, evaluating, improving, and standardizing the way schools view, interpret, and respond to data. Prior to Parsec, Eugene was a statistician at Madera Unified, data analyst at Pioneer Union Elementary School District, and a research associate for Educational Resource Consultants Incorporated. Eugene, thank you for joining me today on the Getting Naked with Educational Leaders podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I thought that we moved away from getting naked.
We did, and then we came back to it.
Oh my gosh, we can never put that thing to bed.
No, we can't. And for everyone who's listening, please go to our podcast session with Babatunde Ilori, our CEO, to better understand the why behind it. But I'm excited because I feel like it embodies our culture and what you and Babatunde have done so well to create this authentic space. Do you want to just speak to that a little bit?
I just want to clarify that we're not running a nudist colony. It's not literal. It's all about just transparency. And, I love the whole thing about truth over comfort.
Yeah. Babatunde flagged that for us as something that you used to say all the time, especially in Madeira. Tell me a little bit. Unpack that for me. What do you mean when you say truth over comfort?
Well, speaking of, before I dive into this, I need to get this off my chest. I woke up this morning and I was really looking forward to a slow Monday morning. And then I see my calendar and I'm like, oh my gosh, the first person I need to talk to this morning is Rachael Maves. And I'm like, great, that just ruined my day. And then I saw, oh gosh, there's a podcast that was not on my radar for the longest time. So I had to run around, drench my head, put some gel in it, and get ready for this podcast.
Well, I appreciate you looking presentable. Thank you. Okay, so truth over comfort, and then we'll get into our other questions.
Well, that was a little example of truth. For me, it's not about image or cultivating a personal sort of rap sheet. I could care less about that. For me, it's really about changing lives, changing outcomes. There's a proverb that I hold dear to, and it speaks to this concept of truth over comfort, and how you're supposed to surround yourself with people who will always challenge your own ideas and push you to become a better person. And my goodness, this is why you don't schedule a podcast in the morning, because my mind just went blank, Rachael. This is all your fault. Do you know what I'm talking about? Please help me with my recall.
Yes, the wounds from a friend can be trusted. Is it that?
Yeah, the wounds of a friend are better than the kisses of an enemy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Simple DOK1 recall, and I just failed that test. Okay. And so that's why you're on the team. And I think that's partly the reason why you joined Parsec, is because you saw this motley crew of people who deeply care about this singular mission of transforming K-12 education so that our kids have a much brighter future and also better outcome in terms of career or college and career. But the people that we've assembled at Parsec Education were really authentic, raw. We'll never skirt around the truth. But even when we speak hard truth, at the end of the day, we can laugh. And,
That's right.
And we can still be friends. And we are still very respectful of each other and loving of each other. And that's the culture that I just want to perpetuate.
Yeah. Well, and you and Babatunde model that well, because you're right. I mean, that is why I joined the Parsec team. And I still remember the first time watching the two of you kind of go toe to toe, and I think my eyes were just pretty wide thinking, how's this going to end? And then by the end, you guys were laughing and talking, and you had moved right on. And there was no like future backlash or anything else that happened afterwards. It was, we were going to talk this out, and we were going to say what we needed to say, and we still care about each other, and we value and respect one another, and we're going to then move to the next thing. It was
Yeah,
pretty
it's really important
spectacular.
because, I mean, one of the most unhealthy things you can do as an adult is hold a grudge
That's
and
right.
go to bed with that grudge. And it
Mhm.
just eats you up inside. And so, I, one, I don't ever want to see that or feel that personally. And I think we've
Mhm.
done a really good job of creating a culture where, people can go to bed happy and happy that they're a part of this wonderful crew, you know, that we can work towards a common goal even when sometimes we disagree.
Yeah. One of the other things, Eugene, that really drew me to Parsec as well, and it wasn't part of our list of questions, but I feel like it deserves space to be highlighted, is, I mean, you're the founder of this organization. You sacrificed significantly, and you can share a little bit about that if you'd like, to fund and get Parsec off the ground. Yet you
Hmm.
brought in Babatunde as the CEO to run the
Yeah.
company, which, I mean, that's not common when you look at founders and the way that they interact and engage with their organization. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about that. Like what vision you had, why did you bring in Babatunde, and that decision that you made?
Yeah. Back in 2018, sold our home. That was our first home that we ever purchased back in 2012. And luckily, that's when the market was dipping. And so when we sold it, 6 years later, we had some equity built up.
Mhm.
And I literally had just a year just to live off of, the proceeds of that sale. And it's a running joke now, but at the time when I pushed that email campaign button, I thought I was going to get arrested. The power of just, people just singing your praises goes a really long ways, and that's how Parsec grew, is word of mouth. And just a handful of people who answered my spam emails really saw the amazing work that we were doing. And then from there on, it's just history. And then Babatunde, what was it? It was about a year and a half ago, or a little under 2 years. I hit a wall. I was having some really severe health issues, chronic anxiety, panic attacks. And it's because I was overworking myself. I didn't really have a lot of support. I mean, I had about two to three employees, but I was still, you know, carrying a lot of weight on my shoulders, doing all of the speaking engagements. And I just remember every morning I would wake up and immediately there would be chest tightness.
Mhm.
I equated it to a 700-pound gorilla just standing on my chest. And it was incredibly hard for me to even get through just simple Zoom meetings. There was one Zoom meeting where I just had to pause and say, I'm sorry, I'm actually having a panic attack. There was one time when I flew down to Los Angeles to do a power standard training, and before that 2 hour session, I was in the restroom just heaving, and so it was not a good season. And luckily by then, I the annual revenue was closer to $1 million, and that gave me some wiggle room to go and recruit some talent. And the very first person that I wanted to bring on board was Bob Batunde, and I knew from knowing him, and he's talked about, wanting to be a public servant and wanting to run for county superintendent and blah blah blah. And I'm like, whatever's. You have an MBA. I know you've always had an itch for going to the private sector and running a business and being an entrepreneur. And so, I reached out to him and I was just honest with him. You remember, just being
Yeah.
completely transparent about my health. And when he was somewhat on board, we talked about governance. And I mean, I would say that the Lord was speaking to me, and through my wife too, just let go of control, because we were
Mhm.
talking about like a co-CEO sort of arrangement.
Yeah.
But then, going through just a recovery program at my church, it just dawned on me that I just needed to let go and really trust people. And so I just said, Babatunde, you're going to be the CEO. I'm just going to let go. And personally, that was really, really hard, because one of the struggles that I have constantly is control. And just to let go was probably one of the best decisions I've made, because one, there was instant relief, and then two, I can really focus on the things that really bring me a lot of joy, and that's innovation.
Yeah. Well, and that is one thing that I feel like Parsec does really well. It's the how are we ensuring that everyone is playing to their strengths? And I think you model that, Eugene, in a very profound way to be able to say, I'm handing over the day-to-day operations to Babatunde and really actually trusting him with all of that space. And then your focus really being on innovation, creation, design work, which you're phenomenal at. And we see people operating in their strengths. And I would say even with where the company is today, you've seen the blessing that's poured out in that space when you do it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty, I know I say this all the time, but it's not common, the track that you've taken. And look at where we are today. We just kicked off our first summit, 150 people attending. We're still hearing rave reviews about that. More than tripled what your annual revenue was prior to bringing Babatunde on. Our staff, we're still hiring. We're up to what, 22 now, full-time staff
I
that are
think we're
working with
getting closer to
us.
30, Rachel.
Yeah, actually with all the brand new people, probably. So,
Uh-huh.
is this part of what you envisioned? Is it exceeding? Where do you hope we continue to go? What does that look like for you?
Early on, I just thought, boy, it's nice to just run my own operations. I never ever envisioned this growing to like a corporate size,
Yeah.
where our growth is, to Jamin's terms, a J curve, right? We're just seeing exponential growth, not in terms of just revenue only, but people. Like, one of the best advices I got was, you go into business not to make money, but to create jobs.
Mm.
And I really love that. And so, no, actually, I thought I would just have like a handful of just annual contracts, and I just live off of that. But then something did change. Like, when I did notice that, wow, this is having an immediate impact and a huge impact on our K-12 systems. That's when I saw, okay, the potential that this could be much bigger, that it's not just limited just to the Central Valley, not just limited to California, not just limited to the United States, that this can be a global revolution. I use that word again, revolution. I use these words that I should not use in education, like, what is it, infiltrate, and it's like these trigger words. And it's funny because I have someone, Kathleen, over at Springs Charter. I call her my mom in education. And anytime I get up to speak at a conference, she's always coaching me things not to say. And now I've got another mom in Rachael Maves, and she's like, "You can't say that, Eugene." Yeah, yeah. But again, just going back to the growth of our company. Now I do have I see a bigger vision where I think our mission is attainable. I truly do.
Yeah. Yeah,
Excuse me.
I agree. And I think everybody's behind you with that, which is exciting. We're all going in the same direction. So tell me a little bit about why education. What brought you into education? Why that career pathway that you wanted to serve?
Well, after UC San Diego, I was offered a job at Educational Resource Consultants, which is based here out of Fresno. And it's funny because the founders of ERC, it was Steve Price's son, Noel, who was that one person who changed my life, right,
Mm.
in high school or in K-12. He was my world history teacher in ninth grade. And then he was my AP Gov teacher. And as a junior, I was a teacher's aide. I had literally like 8 months of lunch detention with him because I would come to school late, tardy, and I had racked up so much lunch detention. But he was so gracious because he had like these little uh, he had fruit gummies, he had like canned tuna, he had like little sausages, and he literally fed me, every
Mm.
day. And so, anyways, after college, he talked to his dad and brother, and it's like, hey, you should, look into Eugene. I think he'd be a good fit. And so I got started working as a research associate at a private grant and evaluation firm. And they had contracts with like Fresno County Office of Ed's after school program, LAUSD's Beyond the Bell. And so I was more on the evaluation side. I didn't really write any of the grants, and I did that for 2 years. And so that was my way into the education. And then the reason why I stayed in education is it's I think honestly the biggest lever to change society.
Yeah, that's right.
Period.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And you want to do that through data.
I do.
Yeah. When you think about education and where it's at in its current state, what keeps you up at night?
Oh, that's a question that's going to get me in trouble, Rachel. You're not supposed to ask that. I need to watch what I say. It's not perfect. I would go as far to say that it is broken. There's an incredible amount of inefficiencies in education. There's this problem of working in isolation. I know that when we talk about the improvement science framework, solutionitis is a big problem, especially with LCFF. When these school districts got all this additional funding in SNC dollars here in California, literally they would just throw money at the problem. And that just drove me up a wall. I just couldn't stand that because those are tax generated funds. And I just felt that they were just being misused and it wasn't really benefiting our kids. Again, for me, I look at just the ones and zeros and I did not see any results.
Yeah.
And so how could you just maintain a system that just doesn't see any improvement?
Hmm.
Yeah, you might have some bright spots here and there, but that's really because of personnel. It's not a system, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a system, a statewide system or a nationwide system that consistently produces high results. And then when you look at the variance between like low performing and high performing schools that share similar demographics, it's just it's just too wide.
Yeah.
So again, and that points back to it's a broken system.
So when you think about how to move forward, and you've alluded to this a little bit, what do you see as that vision?
We really have to unlock the collaboration
Mhm.
issue. And I think one of the platforms that we've been working on 24/7, Academy, Parsec Academy, really helps teachers to get outside those four walls. We talk about, how people, especially in education, work in isolation. And it's not just individual school systems or administrators, it's teachers. They might have their little PLC time, but that's it. And a lot of times those PLCs aren't really working, right? So I want to completely revamp that entire model, call it the Parsec Hour of Power.
Okay, that's the first time I'm hearing this new name.
No, I know. Uh, and really have teachers, bought into our framework and where, it's not just working collectively and being responsible collectively for student outcomes, but leveraging the most latest and greatest technologies. I
Yeah,
mean, with
that's
the advent of generative AI, I mean, there's so much potential on the horizon, and a lot of the work that they did, like the manual, like tedious, monotonous work, is shouldn't be a reality for teachers anymore, right? But
yeah,
they're still doing it.
yeah.
And so we just need to get out in front and really help them to, and I think it is a paradigm shift for a lot of teachers. So we'll be the catalyst.
And you bring up a good point because right now, and we've talked about this even internally, AI is pretty controversial within education. And there's a lot of discussion around, is this the next fad? Is it going to eventually disappear and taper? Is it going to completely remove educators altogether? Like, how do we use this in an effective way? And what I appreciate about Academy and even Real and some of these other tools that Parsec has developed is that it's looking at the space that time sucks with a very limited amount of time for teachers and principals and administrators, and saying, how can we leverage technology and AI to accelerate processes that don't require that deep thinking from the teacher? And I think a great example is within Academy. Instead of everything living in a document that then requires that you make all of these minute changes year to year, it's tedious to update. Being able to put that into a platform that at a click of a button can shift and change, it can adapt to the calendar. I mean, all of those tools that save so much time for our educators. It makes so much sense.
Yeah, so it's always natural and it's expected to have a segment of society that is hesitant to adopt emerging technologies. I mean,
Yeah.
we can go back in history and talk about the internet, and like people were like, "Oh my goodness, it's." I mean, again, I'm going to get in trouble, so I'm not. You know what? I'm going to scrap it. I'm not going to say it. But they think it's the end of the world, or like to your point, it's something that's just going to fade away.
That's
It's
right.
just a fad, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember just listening to the story. I think it was Elon Musk, and this is when he was first, venturing out and creating software for the internet. And I don't know if this is a true story, but he went to one of the executives over at Yellow Book and was trying to get that published on an online platform. And the executive threw the book at him and said that nothing would ever replace it. And so generative AI is like the internet. There's no way of avoiding it.
That's
It is
right.
here to stay.
That's
It's
right.
not a fad. It is not a fad. I'm sorry. If you're drinking that Kool-Aid, you're drinking that Kool-Aid. I'm sorry. There's no way of just getting around it. And so, we're going to experience these tremendous leaps in the tech sector. And these are generative AI is one of the big leaps. And I just hope that people would just embrace it, because it is going to make lives a lot easier and better. And it's you shouldn't see it as a threat. It's there to assist you, not replace you. Now, but I will say that statement isn't completely true. Our mission at Parsec Education is to use generative AI to assist teachers. But I know that in other industries, it's going to be a little different. Yeah, there is going to be some replacement that is happening in terms of human workforce. I think that fear is trickling into the education sector.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you're right. We saw the same thing when technology was coming into K-12, just in general, using computers in the classroom, building those skills. And I think I have the same fear as you, at least from my perspective. In education, we were so resistant to that it literally took a global pandemic for us to get computers in the hands of almost every kid. And still we haven't accomplished that. And that seems like such a travesty to me, knowing how many other sectors have embraced that and made leaps and bounds in the work that they're doing. And my hope is that we would learn in education that we can't, if we are going to train and raise up and really provide the best chance possible for this next generation that comes up underneath us, we have to be able to give them access to all of these tools so that they can then come in and contribute to society in that meaningful way to launch it into whatever this next sector is going to look like. And I don't think we know that yet.
Yeah, isn't it funny that kids probably learn about emerging technologies not during the 7 hours they're at school,
That's
but
right. Yeah.
outside of that, when they
Yeah.
get home
Yeah.
and they're on their computers or hanging out with their friends and sharing things on their cell phones. No, school is the place to learn about those emerging technologies.
Mhm.
I mean, I think fundamentally with all of this sort of breakthroughs, right? Whether it's generative AI, blockchain technology, or other things that are happening. In school systems, we talk about the importance of conceptual understanding. I think that's where kids, really need help is like, for goodness sakes, like, you talk about generative AI as if you're an expert, but you're not really an expert. Like, I talk about generative AI, and for goodness sakes, I don't even know where to start, when it
Yeah.
comes to building a language model.
Yeah.
And so it would be really cool. Like, I don't even know any public school systems that are venturing into that space of like, hey, kids, this is how you can build your own language model. Have you heard of
Yeah.
anything like that?
No,
No.
I have not.
That's only, available, at the collegiate level, or maybe even outside of
I was going to say
college.
maybe even
It
outside of
might it
college.
might be even just at tech companies, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's the only place where you can learn about how to create this like amazing language model. And so again, school systems, publicly funded school systems, need to embrace emerging technologies. They need to be a little more forward thinking, and they need to take big risks.
Yeah, I agree. That's a perfect note for us to wrap up, Eugene. So my guest today has been Eugene Park, founder of Parsec Education. Thank you, Eugene, for joining me today on the Getting Naked with Leaders in Education podcast.